the States. Welcome to TAtech Live. Thank you very much for joining me. We are always looking at areas of discussion within TAtech where we not only get into the bones of what our members are doing within TAtech, but the wider topics that are being discussed amongst the TA community worldwide. Not only the technology, but how the technology is applied in real life. It's often the case with technology companies that you focus entirely on the nuts and bolts of what you're doing, but it really pays dividends to look a bit further at how your technology is being deployed, how people are using it, how people are sometimes working around it if it's causing a bump in the road for them, and how the lives of frontline recruiters are being affected by the technology that you put in front of them. It's often the case that recruiters have technology put in front of them that they didn't ask for, and we hope that it's going to be useful to them. But of course, the discussions that we have on how that technology is applied is how we, in the technology side, learn to do better. So my very special guests today are going to help us in talking about exactly that. Alicia O'Brien and Adam Gordon. Adam and Alicia, good afternoon. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, viewers will be very aware of Adam. Adam almost needs no introduction. You're world famous in the recruitment circles, but which is a pretty tight niche, let's say. But Alicia, can I ask you? Can you let us know a little bit about your background and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my name is Alicia O'Brien. I'm based in Tampa, Florida. I'm a leader of global talent operations here at Jabil, a large manufacturing organization. And I've spent the last 2 decades really learning and perfecting the craft of recruitment and helping to enable recruitment teams to do their jobs better. That's probably the easiest way to explain it.
Superb. And Adam, for the uninitiated, can you tell us a little bit more about you and of course poetry?
Yes, certainly. I started in recruitment in 1999 in a recruitment agency, moved into a recruitment marketing company, spent a bit of time in HR consulting with PwC, and then started building my own businesses. I've been a more successful human being working for myself than working for other people. The first company was Social Media Search, which was a talent sourcing business. And I was then co-founder of Candidate ID, which we sold to iSIMS before starting poetry in 2023, exactly 3 years ago.
Fantastic. So let's not beat around the bush. Let's get right into it. We're here to talk about hiring enablement, the missing layer in the talent technology or the talent acquisition technology stack. I talk a lot about TA stacks and how they fit together. How is the understanding of hiring enablement? And we used to talk a lot about, maybe we still do talk about recruiter enablement, but hiring enablement, how is that fitting into the technology landscape? Adam, first.
Well, I just go back a little bit, and when I started studying this in early 2023, it was because I'd become quite familiar with sales enablement. And sales enablement as a discipline and as a type of technology is all about giving salespeople all of the intelligence and the content assets and the tools and props and calculators and things that they need to complete their sales deals, from a cold call right through to closing the deal and onboarding the customer. And as I was learning about that, I was thinking, how do we enable recruiters and hiring teams? Because they need a vast amount of different things to complete their tasks as well, including talent intelligence and competitor intelligence and assets like job descriptions and job ads and social media posts and outreach messaging and interview questions, etc. And it just got me thinking that this is a vastly underserved area of recruiting. Almost everything we do is aimed at candidate profiles, whether it's discovery or assessment. But actually the tasks recruiters do are far more varied than that.
Yeah.
And they're actually probably far more varied than almost any white collar professional I can think of. So I just thought it was a rich opportunity for both people in TA and people like me providing solutions into TA to really get stuck into it.
Yeah. I know that over the past few years, Adam, people can't help but have noticed the volume of people that you speak to on video calls like this that you'll put out, but as well as calls that you have privately with people in TA. And I know, Alicia, you do very much the same thing, or have done over the past 15 years, consulting in the TA space. In speaking with those people at the coalface, if you like, I would imagine it's always an education, because there's a lot of people in technology companies surmising what's going to be good for recruiters without asking them. So in the asking of recruiters, what are the things that stand out to you that should be obvious to the world?
I think it's really easy to forget that there's processes that recruiters have to follow or should follow. And the baseline question often should be, is this solution helping or hindering me to follow my process or to do things in a more efficient way? Because there can be a great idea and it's something that can be turned into a technology that has all of the great aspirations of being impactful. But if it doesn't fit in a process, or a process can't necessarily be adjusted to accommodate, we're kind of comparing apples and oranges in a way of determining how effective or how great something can be. Because it can make it work, but if you just assume, here you go, take this thing and use it, and don't necessarily talk about how it's built in, then that does not create a lot of cohesion.
There's certainly been in the past 10 years, in fact, quite a lot longer than that, new technologies come along all the time, and they're plopped on the desk of a recruiter. Here, the TA leader or someone in procurement has acquired this solution. You're going to use it, and they walk away, and they're maybe given a bit of onboarding, but the recruiter is left to deal with that. Now, that can happen multiple times, and they come to terms with the platform that they're using. But each time a new piece of software comes in, they get more fatigued with, is this going to work? Is it a trial that we're going to stick with? Do I absolutely have to use this software when I know a perfectly good workaround? When looking at new technologies now, what's the feeling amongst recruiters when they're presented with the new shiny thing that their boss has got for them?
I'll give a bit of perspective on that from somebody who sells technologies to recruitment teams, and that is that they hate it. They hate new things. They don't want to have another technology. They're absolutely overwhelmed with the number of places they've got to log in to get their tasks done as it is. They're also fed up with people who recruitment is one of these things that's so visible because everybody's been a candidate at some point, and like a lot of people have been hiring managers, and therefore they think they know recruitment really well because their experience told them that they got ghosted and that should never happen, or whatever it might be. Right? But actually recruitment's vastly more complicated than people from outside really can understand. That's why I spend a huge amount of time listening and learning and running focus groups and interviewing people and finding out what is true. When it comes to recruiters taking on new technologies, I mean, I think there are a tiny number of people, it could be 5% of recruiters, who are like the recruiting brain food type crew who want to go and vibe code their own stuff, and they're at the bleeding edge, right?
Yeah.
But that is just because they're quite visible and they're quite noisy and they're on LinkedIn a lot telling people what they're doing. That is not the vast majority of recruiters. Most people just want to get their hires done, and they don't want to have to learn new things and do new stuff because that's getting them in the way of them getting their work completed. Yeah. So my experience is you really have to be able to demonstrate very clearly the value somebody's going to get. And from my perspective, if you can say, yes, this is a new technology that you're going to have to log into, but you don't have to use 6 other things as a result of being able, taking on this one thing. And after about a week, your life is going to be much easier. That's quite a good way to sell it. But I'm interested in what Alicia says from the kind of inside.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying to a certain degree, Adam, in the sense that you've got to make it worth their while. And I think it's also important to manage the expectation up front that, and I'm just going to talk about where we sit right now. It's 2026. Our
Yeah,
industry has vastly changed over the past five, call it 10 years. We are going to ask you to do your job in a slightly different way. And we need to all have an open mind that this is not very likely going to fit right in this law of this process that I was referring to earlier. So I think a lot of it has to do with managing expectations, but then also continuing to provide those resources along the way of what happens when I run into a roadblock, or why is this taking me slightly longer than the last way that I know how to do things so well. Because just like riding a bike, just like anything else, it's going to take time to become very efficient with whatever we're asking people to do. But we also have to remember they're being held to KPIs. So if my time to fill that my hiring manager is very concerned about was once 60 days and we want to keep it there, is this going to help me keep my time to
yeah.
fill in 60 days, or is it going to make it better or worse? Or maybe there's just a little learning curve and then we'll actually make it 55. And to Adam's point, your job then becomes that much easier. But I think we have to frame it that way and build the trust. Just like recruiters have to build trust with their hiring managers, we
Yeah.
as TA enablement leaders or technologists have to build that trust that eventually we're going to get to that place where there's greater efficiencies or an easier way to perform my duties.
There's a really great point in there about the balance that you have to strike between what's good for the recruiter and what's good for the organization, because we're now living in a world where the organization needs to retain context. It needs to retain more information about here's how to do recruitment better. And so, yeah, we might be asking recruiters to do one or two extra steps beyond what they've done before, but that's actually for the company's benefit. And you might not, it might be quite difficult to explain exactly why you need all, the additional context and things like that. But from the recruiter's perspective, I've never, in fact, from every white collar, in fact, probably every working person's perspective, there's never been a period, certainly that I can remember, of more disruption and dynamism, and where the concept of the people who are going to thrive are the most adaptable to change, than there is today. It's if you can't deal with change, you're going to have to get a psychiatrist and work out how you can, because there's no other option.
You mentioned earlier, Adam, that the role of the recruiter has expanded enormously, and actually they're expected to be much more creative than before in terms of their output on various channels, whether it be job adverts themselves or employer branding and various other components that they're putting together. So many recruiters are their expectations of what their work would be did not include that creative aspect. So having those elements in the job must be a frustration when you've got that sole target in front of you, bums on seats filling those jobs, and if they're not filled, then questions are going to be asked. How do you make sure that task becomes as simple as possible, and they can get on with the parts that require their input from between their ears in terms of weighing up candidates and getting to job offers?
Yeah, I think that when I started in recruiting, the job of the recruiter was to really achieve influence with candidates and hiring managers and HR teams, and try and win business and then close the business from my agency, recruitment days. And we moved towards a world where recruiters started having to do more in the way of talent attraction as channels became more digital and more diverse. And they were having to, create their own assessments and things like that. But then we moved to a point where talent acquisition teams became so segmented that there was some people whose job was talent intelligence, some other people whose job was talent sourcing, some other people whose job was exec resourcing, some other people whose job was interviewing, some other people whose job was scheduling interviews, right? But I think there's been we've gone back again. There's been a seesaw, and we've gone back to a world where more recruiters are what we sometimes describe as 360 degree. They're responsible for a lot from the start to the finish.
So the fewer silos than before. People in silos focusing on one aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think there probably was. Mm-hmm. But what you then have is if the recruiter's got to do all these different things. I mean, there is no. I don't know one recruiter who is an expert interviewer and an expert talent sourcer and a wonderful content creator, and they can't do all of these things. So what we have to do is we have to help them all to level up in the areas that they maybe aren't quite as strong as. And my belief is we can do it in two ways. We can either roll out lots of ongoing training, or we can create technologies which really automate the development of a lot of the stuff that they need to complete their tasks so that they can spend as much time as possible sourcing, achieving influence, encouraging the hiring manager to move forward with something or to stop doing, or whatever it might be. And I think that the core skill that a recruiter needs today is emotional intelligence and perseverance. And if we can spoon feed them with all the other stuff, to me, that's quite a useful concept.
Is the ability to have those, well, first of all, when new technology comes in, you need quick wins to build adoption, to build faith in the platform that you have. But one of the key things is working with, and it used to be butting up against hiring managers, but being able to get hiring managers on board with quick wins for them, where they feel that they're part of the same team. Is it still the case that, using technology, how can we make that team spirit live between the hiring managers and the recruiters to make sure that they're not only both facing in the same direction, but they get the same wins?
I think when you look at the entirety of the process, a lot of it comes with what expectations are set up front. So what roles do we all play? What roles can we all play? And that might look different from hiring manager to recruiter relationship. And some of that, Adam, goes back to your point of where are the recruiter strengths and then what can we build up in the back end? But as an example, maybe somebody's very well networked. How can we leverage that? Maybe somebody else has an affinity for that market intelligence and leveraging it to tell a story. It's expanding on those skills so that way the recruiter has access to that information readily available, whether they've done it themselves or they've learned from somebody who's an expert, and then putting all those different things together so that way we're not having to, in some senses, waste time to go get the other person. And then maybe they missed some of that context. And Adam, you used that word before. Context is crucial in these conversations. So the more we can provide that contextual information to whomever is going to be supporting in that team environment, then we're all acting off of the same information. And then also can have really good deliberation and discussion to make sure we're all aligned. Because half the battle in recruitment is this person doesn't agree with this person, and then we have an issue, and then we have to recalibrate and start over again.
I've often seen in recruitment teams in large organizations where you'll have, as you say, someone who's very well networked, so people have different skills or influence in certain areas. But there's often a lone wolf recruiter who might be doing things their own way to get their results. But in a global organization, keeping them in tandem, tied in with compliance worldwide, sticking to standards that are non-negotiable. How are you able to maintain that consistency across teams and across territories where you have those lone wolf recruiters who like to do their own thing?
I mean, one of the things that we focus very heavily on at Poetry is ensuring that standards are met, because we did just as an example, we did a bit of research with a global hotel business, which you've all heard of. And we looked at job adverts for hotel jobs around Europe. And it was, I think it was like general manager, bar manager, and restaurant manager, something like that. And we found a whole variety of adverts for all three of these roles in different countries. And it's not that they were written in different languages. They described the company in different ways. They had some of them had a boilerplate. Some of them had a boilerplate which was completely different to the other one. Some of them didn't have any. Some of them were posting job descriptions. Some of them were posting things that were factually incorrect about the organization. And you just can't have that. So what we definitely don't want to do is try and suppress the entrepreneurship of that lone recruiter who like fills every job and does, smashes their targets. But we want to do it in a way where they are not risking damage to the employer brand or the candidate experience by going and just making up their own stuff. So this is why I believe that we should spoon feed them with these types of things. Training's fine, but it's just it's an ongoing thing, and there's just so much that slips through the cracks from my perspective. So we focus very heavily on poetry at recruiter. The job comes in from the applicant tracking system. They click a button to activate it, and then it develops everything they need, all of the job adverts and the social posts and the interview questions and everything, and all the research about the job. And it's all in a consistent format. It's right first time. It's on brand because it's embedded with the company's templates and standards. And they don't have to think about going on to Copilot to type in, could you write me some interview questions or anything like that? It's already done for them. And we want to eliminate clicks if we can, because as we talked about earlier, recruiters are overwhelmed with their technology. So reducing clicks, enforcing standards, enabling hiring teams. And you mentioned it about hiring managers. Hiring is a team sport. So the recruiter's got a role to play in that, as does the hiring manager and the HR business partner and anybody else that's involved in any way. So collaboration is vital as well.
Understanding what roles they all play at the beginning of that process, and then, as you were mentioning before, just making sure that each person that's involved has access to the information that's going to help them to perform their role in that engagement in the best way possible. And to your point, Adam, if there's ways that we can, I like to use this terminology, serve up the latest and greatest or whatever's approved or what have you, and have that easy to access. Again, that's a lot of the challenge that teams go through is, what's the latest? Oh, I know there was an update that was made last Tuesday. Where is that shared file? Having that at the ready and knowing that what we're sharing and distributing amongst teams is the latest and greatest and what we should be doing, that's so important. And then we're not second guessing. And we know that it's the right information and that the brand is being conveyed in the proper way.
Speaking of hiring managers, sorry, on you go, Adam.
So can I just quickly add, it's one of the huge problems that we wanted to solve when we started to build poetry was the concept of the SharePoint black hole and people going in to try and find things, and then they eventually find something and they've got no idea whether it's the up-to-date version, whether the information's right anymore, and then going and compounding the problem by then creating their own thing, having it on their local folder, or just typing it directly into Indeed or LinkedIn and clicking send and it's gone. So, the amount of leakage of intellectual property and the variance of all of that, one central place where hiring managers can come in and self-serve if they want to, and they've all got access to the one same thing. Yeah, it's a bit of a game changer from my perspective.
Speaking of hiring managers, I'm really interested in where hiring enablement fits in with not only external but internal recruitment, internal mobility, where you're working with the hiring managers to bring people from outside, but at the same time there are people within an organization, and you want to be able to consider candidates alongside each other, and obviously internal ones, you have much more data on their performance and how they can perform in this new role if they were to get there. How can hiring and enablement overlap with that when the ATS stops outside the company before people join?
That's a good question. I mean, the ATS, I think when we think about what it's actually meant for, it's tells us where a candidate is, what's their status, and then some other supporting details around it. That's not where the detail for enabling that hiring manager should be coming from, in my opinion. There's a lot of other support and materials that's likely coming from the training group, L&D, or a subset of recruitment operations that supports hiring managers, because sometimes you ask that question in a room and nobody raises their hand. So where does it actually belong? It's something that goes back to understanding what the roles and responsibilities are, not necessarily on a rec by rec basis, but at an org level. But that's separate, and that's a separate thing to consider, in my opinion. And it's something that overall in large organizations, especially, we need to probably get better control over that, because the experience doesn't stop at the recruiter. It actually is extended at that hiring manager level. And that's even more important because there's more hiring managers than there are recruiters in many cases.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, where I'd love to know, we talk about AI all the time, inevitably, and AI is a catalyst for smarter thinking, faster implementation, and lots more beyond. But how does AI fit into hiring enablement? Should AI be doing for recruiters more the task that they would typically be putting their own inventiveness into, or is it just the dull tasks that it can be doing on behalf of recruiters that enable them to do other things?
Well, from my perspective, there's a couple of different ways of thinking about how AI can help enable recruiters. Of course, there's elements of candidate profiles and sourcing, finding people who look as if they could match the role, looking for synonymous job titles, looking for people that might have entirely different job titles but an overlap in the skills required to complete the jobs. So I think there's a great opportunity for talent sourcing with AI. In terms of ranking people, like ranking applicants, of course, it's a huge topic. We need to be able to do it in a way that's transparent and explain our methods for using AI to do that. But we just have to do it. You're getting 2,000 applicants for a role. A recruiter doesn't have time to sift through that. And the previous keyword matching type of technologies that we've used to solve for that are just not quite good enough. So, I don't think there's like AI being used for that is not widespread as far as I'm aware, but it needs to become so because I think that's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
But for me and what we've done, it's more about the assets and the content and the intelligence and ensuring the templating for things, surfing the internet in like fractions of a microsecond to return the information that people want and need to help them to, do a great job on the role. And I really believe every organization needs to effectively have its own sort of AI environment, because if you're going on to vanilla chatbots like Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever, and you're just going on there and starting from the beginning around like, I need talent intelligence or I need whatever, it doesn't have enough context about your business. It certainly doesn't have the templates and things like that. So that's what we've been working very, very hard on is best use of AI in a way that is not breaking any rules around compliance and data and things like that. And a lot of quick wins.
Yeah. Alicia, I'm very interested in the use of technology to reduce the previous burden of technology. It's often the case in recruitment tech that a solution will come along in order specifically to deal with the problems created by a previous piece of technology, and you end up with a mountain of tech that's all trying to correct for each other. So being able to simplify your tech stack is always an ambition, and I've certainly spoken with plenty of people in TA who say, I wish I could just burn it all down and start again. And throw out everything and then just reconsider each piece of new technology that we bring in. In terms of simplifying the burden of tech on recruiters, how do you set about the process in the first place? I suppose I would always think, let's audit what we have and understand what we have and then move from there. But how would you set about that?
I would actually go about it in a slightly different way and think about today, what problems are we looking to solve or what problems need solving? And then evaluating whether said technology that's in place has the ability to help us solve the problems with what's already there, which would be great. Maybe it's a re-implementation or turning on certain features that might not have been on before. Mm-hmm. And then from there, it's if the current tech stack can't solve those challenges, what can? And it might not be a new technology. It might be actually the harder work, which is taking a step back and evaluating the entirety of the process and understanding, does this work for us in, again, I'll say it, 2026? Is it going to work for us in 2030? And really thinking about it that way, and then working backwards. But the other thing that I think is really important to consider is, who are your recruiters and what are they good at? What are their strengths? Where do they want to go? Because leveraging that and understanding where they want to grow can help them get bought in to figure out what some of those solutions might be. Or maybe there's certain things you don't need to solve for because that skill set does exist within the team that we have. And then we just need a way to memorialize it and then expand upon that for future team members. So I think about process first and tech second. So then we don't just continue to exacerbate the problem.
Yeah. Adam, I often think about the suite of tools that there are with Poetry as a bit like, remember the adverts 20 years ago for the one-for-all remote controls? Control all your devices, don't have 5 of them. But in terms of technology working together, I would assume that the technology within Poetry is already dovetailed with each other. One leads to the other, and it simplifies the process. Now, it's a loaded question. Of course, you're going to say, yes, it does. But how are people going to feel the benefit of that in terms of reaching those targets, not only to put bums on seats, people in jobs, but to have a better outcome in terms of the caliber of candidates that are hired, as well as the speed of hiring them?
Well, I'll just explain how we use AI and how the sequencing kind of works. So when I put a new job into Poetry, the first thing it does is Poetry reviews all of the customers' internal documents around their employer brand guidelines and their interview guidelines, all that type of thing.
Yeah.
It uses that context. It looks at the default templating that we've got around the best practice for all the things that we recommend, the way things should look. It then goes onto the internet and researches certain places like PayScale and Glassdoor and sources like that, Office of National Statistics. It looks at McKinsey. It looks at all sorts of different things. It brings all that information back in. We've got some third-party plugins which filter that information, like People Data Labs, for example, looks at salaries. And if it's slightly out of date, because we're capturing information from 2023 or 24, that will add on the 5% or whatever the growth has been in the last 2 years or whatever it might be. And only at that point does it then start developing all of the kind of candidate-facing assets and things like that, because we want to make sure that all of that context is used to go into the talent personas and to go into the objection handling responses and to go into the elevator pitches and things that Poetry is producing. So the sequencing of this is developed first in order to make sure that this is great, in order to make sure that this is better. Yeah, it's such a nuanced thing. I don't think anybody else has probably ever done a project like that before, the way we've done that. But it's been fun. And what it means is we are producing the absolute optimal assets for that recruiter, for that job on that day, with the information we have up to date as of that minute.
I always like to ask founders and CEOs of technology companies, what are the novel ways in which frontline recruiters are using your software, your platform, in ways that you didn't initially intend, that you're learning from them? What are the surprising ways that people are using your tech that you're thinking, hold on a second, we didn't consider that? That's really cool.
Well, I mean, there's always one that springs to mind just over the last few months. There was one of our customers is a major pharmacy business. And after they signed up for Poetry, they went, could you also do this? And then when they explained what their process was for getting images to go with social media posts and job ads, the recruiter was contacting the talent attraction team and saying, I need an advert. I need an image for a pharmacy job in Taunton, right? And then the talent attraction person would go onto their PowerPoint deck. They would find the ones that are suitable for that. They would then type in Taunton. They'd type in a salary or whatever, and then they would turn that into a JPEG. They'd send it back to the recruiter. The recruiter would then have to add that to their LinkedIn post or whatever. So we build with customers all the time. Yeah. So we wanted to solve that. And that was probably the most challenging thing that we've done to date. But now the recruiter clicks develop social media post. And then the default is that it dynamically applies an image to that with all the right information on it. And then they can click from there, share to LinkedIn. And so they're doing in 2 or 3 clicks what was easily taking 30 or 40 clicks previously.
Before we wrap up, Alicia and Adam, what do you have in the coming months that's gonna surprise people out there? That you know about the marketplace that maybe not everyone out there is quite getting so far.
Well, I spend a lot of time working in a global capacity, so looking at different compliance measures that are coming into play across the globe and how those are going to change and impact the way that we go about recruitment. And there's a couple of changes that have recently been made, and there's a couple of changes that are coming in the next few months that either are on their way to being rolled out or we already know they're going to be. And it's just a matter of how we can equip our teams to deal with that, frankly, and how are we going to have to change our verbiage? How are we going to say things? How are we not going to say things? That's something that I think is really important. And it's not the most exciting, but it is important. So that's what I'll say.
Absolutely.
That's something, what you just said there, that every single major organization is having to do more of in the age of AI, when recruiters have got more freedom to go and do their own thing. It's more important than ever that there's guardrails in place and that standards are applied, dynamically, automatically. From my perspective, so the one thing that we have just begun working on, which is a very exciting program for us, is what we call a less exciting name, which is the Candidate Pack. Yeah. And that is when I develop my job inside Poetry and I've built all of the assets that I need and all the intel and the marketing content and the operational assets, I can click another button. I can say Build Candidate Pack. And what it's going to do is it's going to go and grab in London, here's the culture in our office, and here's how to get to the office, and here's what it's like to work for our company in this location. And this is a job in go-to-market. In the go-to-market area, we've got this interview with the hiring manager. We'll pull that into the Candidate Pack, and here's the job description, and here's a colleague story, and it will dynamically lasso everything that is going to be helpful to that particular candidate for that specific role. And so it's going to do the same type of orchestration work that we're doing to help recruiters to enable candidates to be best prepared.
I think that's fantastic. We know that every candidate researches employers, and if the employer can take charge of the narrative in the beginning and provide as much information as possible, then that's got to help the candidate experience and keep them on board past the point at which other jobs they might be ghosted. So it's always good to see. I see that we've gone a bit past time, so I'm going to say on that note, thank you very much, Alicia. Thanks, Adam, for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are in the world. We'll be back with another show next week. But in the meantime, thank you very much and goodbye.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Bye-bye.